Hello students, welcome to the lecture on business environment, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand the meaning of business environment, define factors affecting environment of business, explain economic factors, understand economic components and its impact on business, define legal environment, explain external factors influencing business environment, understand international business environment. Let us discuss about business environment. Business environment encompasses all those factors that affect a company's operation and includes customers, competitors, stakeholders, suppliers, industry trends, regulations, other government activities, social and economic factors, and technological developments. Understanding the environment within which the business has to operate is very important for running a business unit successfully at any place, because the environment factors influence almost every aspect of business, be it its nature, its location, the prices of products, the distribution system, or the personal policies. In addition, we shall also acquaint ourselves with the concept of social responsibility of business and business ethics. Now let us discuss about the meaning of business environment. Business depends on adapting itself to the environment within which it functions. On the basis of the above discussion, the feature of business environment can be summarized as follows. Business environment is the sum total of all factors external to the business firm and that greatly influences their functioning. It covers factors and forces like customers, competitors, suppliers, government, and the social, cultural, political, technological, and legal condition. The business environment is dynamic in nature, which means it keeps on changing. The changes in business environment are unpredictable. It's very difficult to predict the exact nature of future happenings and the changes in economic and social environment. The survival and success of a business firm depend on its strength, resources at its command, including physical resources, financial resources, human resources, skill and organization, and its adaptability to the environment and the extent to which environment is favorable to the development of the organization. The survival and success of a firm does depend on two sets of factors, namely the internal factors, the internal environment, and external factors, the external environment. The interaction between the business and its environment helps in identifying the opportunities for and threats to the business. It opens up new frontiers of growth for the business firms. Environmental analysis makes the task of managers easier in dealing with business challenges. There is a close and continuous interaction between the business and its environment. This interaction helps in strengthening the business firm and using its resources more effectively.
The term business intelligence was used first time, and in 1990s the technology of business intelligence actually came into being in the sense in which it is used these days. In 1990s and onwards, the market for business intelligence tools was very fragmented. The consolidation began in 2007 onwards. Three very important acquisitions took place within a span of 2 years. In 2007, Oracle acquired Hyperion, and SAP acquired Business Objects in 2008. IBM also acquired Cognos in 2008. So the three market leaders in business intelligence, Hyperion, Business Objects, and Cognos, they were acquired by another set of market leaders, but in different areas. Oracle was popular in databases, applications, and hardware, and SAP was popular in the applications, and IBM was ruling the world in the databases, hardware, and also somewhat in applications. Now the business intelligence technology was added in the portfolio of product offerings from Oracle, IBM, and SAP. Now these three big companies would now compete in business intelligence area as well. IBM and Oracle were competing in databases and hardware, and SAP and Oracle mainly were competing in ERP world, but now there is a new competition. Keep in mind that there are two cultures for companies. One culture prefers best of the breed products, and another culture prefers integrated solutions. In the best of the breed scenario, a company would purchase hardware from one vendor, database from another vendor, and applications and business intelligence tools from a different vendor. So they're going to go after the best product from different vendors. However, in the integrated solution culture, they're going to go for all these products from one vendor if an integrated solution is available. And this is what IBM, SAP, and Oracle targeted for. They purchased business intelligence products from the market so that they could rebrand them under their name and offer an integrated solution. So here is another example of whatever we have discussed so far. In integrated solutions, you will see same vendor applications connected with same vendors business intelligence, and in best of the breed there will be mix and match. Now mix and match could take place at this higher level where you are using one business intelligence software with a mismatch database, mismatch in terms of vendors. But keep in mind, business intelligence software is not really one software that you download. It is usually a set of tools. Typically you would see these components in a business intelligence software: extract, transform, and load tool, query and reporting tool, analysis tools, visual data discovery tools, predictive analytics tools, and so on. So the question is, we understand best of breed is possible at application database and business intelligence software level, but can people also do mix and match within the components? The answer is it's not very common. However, ETL is the exception. There are vendors out there who simply produce ETL tools only, like Informatica is a good example. But other than that, this ETL exception, if you are going for a business intelligence tool, then you will not be doing a mix and match within the components. If you are using query tool of one vendor, you will be using other tools from the same vendor. In the next session, we will talk more about these components, what ETL is and what is query and reporting tools and so on. And at that time, I will also discuss there is an advantage of using the ETL tool from the same vendor because you get the integration all the way to the front end. So there is an advantage. However, it is not very uncommon that ETL tool is used from a different vendor than all the other components of the business intelligence software. But business intelligence software these days would typically include all these components, including its own ETL tool. And what ETL is, this is the topic for the next session. So these are the big players in the business intelligence market. Keep in mind there are tons of software out there. Some of them are just querying and reporting tools, and some of them are a complete suite of business intelligence components.
Now we need to understand what factors affect the environment of business. Business nowadays is vitally affected by the economic, social, legal, technological, and political factors. These factors collectively form business environment. Business environment as such is the total of all external forces which affect the organization and operation of business. The environment of an organization has got internal, operational, and general lives. Manager must be aware of these three environment levels and their relationships and importance.
Well, in this short video, we're going to discuss the external business environment. And the external business environment encompasses everything that is outside of the control of a particular business. Businesses have very limited control, usually in only the things that they can directly affect, things like production and hiring and capital and different things of that nature. But there are a lot of things that exist outside of the control of many different businesses. And so simply because a business can't control those things doesn't mean that they can't necessarily be oblivious to it. And so by understanding what happens in the external environment, businesses can put themselves in a position where they can adapt to those changes. And so really that's where this type of analysis provides such a huge benefit for a business, is by understanding the opportunities and the threats that are going on. You have the opportunity to potentially leverage those changes and turn those into strengths, or if they're potential threats to your business, you have the ability to maybe insulate yourselves so that the harmful effects of the changes are lessened somewhat or negated altogether. And so the external business environment is very, very important, and businesses pay a great deal of attention to it because of that very fact. So what I'd like to do is simply identify the 5 different dimensions of the external business environment. The reason that we break them into about 5 or so is because we want to make sure that our analysis encompasses certain things, right? Naturally, we are kind of drawn to certain areas that we're more familiar with, and that can cause us to overlook certain things. And so by making it so there's 5 different areas that we're going to look at, we can make sure that at least we've considered some important variables in some key areas, and we don't necessarily overlook some things there, which is obviously not very positive. It can be very detrimental. So I'm going to identify those 5 dimensions, and then what we're going to be doing here in a later video is I will break down each of those dimensions individually, just so I can go into a little bit more detail and I can provide some different examples just so they make sense and to make sure that you understand how these dimensions work here. So let me identify these here real quick so we know what we're going into. The first is what we call the economic environment. And I'm sure you can gather, obviously, what the economic environment is. What we'll do later on is we'll discuss specifically what types of variables that we consider and ultimately what type of benefit that can provide a business. The next dimension of the external business environment is the social environment. This may be also referred to as the socio-cultural environment. They mean the same thing, they're just terms that are actually used interchangeably, but you might refer to it as the social environment, you may refer to it as the socio-cultural environment, depending upon who's mentioning it or depending upon the textbook that you're actually reading. All right, the next is the global environment. And we also have the technological environment. And the last business environment is the competitive environment. And so these are the 5 different dimensions of the external business environment. As I mentioned before, businesses can't control these, they can't affect the outcomes. But the mentality is by conducting some careful analysis in each of these areas and having a better understanding of what goes on in the economic environment, in the social environment, in the global environment, technological as well as competitive, I can put myself in a position to where I can make some decisions based upon some really accurate information, and I know what's going on in my environment, and so I can make the decisions that can potentially put myself in a position to leverage some different changes that are going to happen.
The demand and supply are 2 principal factors that affect the working of any business model. The demand is the will and ability of consumers to purchase a particular commodity, and the supply is the ability of the business to provide for the demand of consumer. It must be noted that all the factors that are included in this list are interconnected. Utility is the amount of satisfaction that is derived by consumer from consumption of goods. It so happens that after continuous and successive consumption of units of the same goods, the satisfaction that is experienced by consumers starts decreasing. This often results into short-term or long-term fall of sale. Some organizations prepare for the launch of another brand before the fall in utility and sales are experienced. Banking facilitates monetary and fiscal policies that affect business and also the customer of the business. Money in circulation dictates the paying power, or rather the demand of the consumers, and the banking facility dictates the borrowing capacity of individual as well as the business. Economic growth dictates the amount of financing that the society at large is earning, and development indicates the volume of money that is being invested into channels of long-term upgradation. Among all economic factors affecting business environment, development is the most important one, as the business has to cater to the demand of an economically dynamic society. Another very important aspect of the economy that affects the working of the business is the level of employment and rate of income. Per capita income and density of employment dictates the rate of demand, density of demand, and also the purchasing power of the people. Another very important aspect of the economy that affects the business is the general price levels of the commodities that also affect the sales of the business. Cost of raw materials, paying power of people, cost of production, and finally, cost of transport are some of the important components that determine the general price level and also the sales of the firm. Trade cycles are the fluctuating costs of goods and commodities in an economy. Rise, stability, continuity, and fall are some of the important cycles that affect the prices of all goods such as raw materials, credit, final goods, etc. Trade cycle also many a time affect the general price level. Let's now understand what economic factors are. A nation's economy can be highly volatile and is often a function of a variety of factors. In a strong economy, unemployment is low and consumers enjoy increased spending power. In a struggling economy, more people are out of work and consumer confidence dwindles. Supply and demand impacts a nation's gross domestic product (GDP), which is the combined dollar value of all goods and services produced by a country in a given year. The high demand for personal computers in India led to an increase in the supply of computers, which contributed to an increase in GDP during that time. The higher the demand for goods and services, the greater the need for workers to produce them, leading to economic growth.
Supply and demand. If you've only heard of one economics concept, it's probably supply and demand. Eventually we'll want to derive this concept from basic assumptions about utility and cost functions, but for now I'll just go through the 2-minute version. Let's start with supply. A supply curve is a relationship between the price of a certain good and the amount of that good producers make. Let's say they're producing umbrellas. Supply curves typically slope upwards, since a higher price means producers can earn more from each item they sell, so it's worth it for them to produce more of that item. Now, on to demand. A demand curve is a relationship between the price of a certain good and the amount of that good buyers want to buy. Although there are exceptions, most demand curves slope downwards. Intuitively, you'll buy more of something if it's cheaper. If we graph our supply curve and our demand curve together, we get this cool little X. The price at which supply and demand cross is the market clearing price. If the price is at the market clearing level, producers produce exactly as many umbrellas as buyers want to buy. So every umbrella is sold, and everyone who wants to buy an umbrella can do so. What if the price of umbrellas is higher than the market clearing price? Then producers make more umbrellas than buyers are willing to buy at that price, and we have a surplus. Similarly, if the price of umbrellas is set below the market clearing price, buyers want to buy lots of umbrellas, but producers aren't so eager to produce that many, so we have a shortage of umbrellas. It's important to realize that the words surplus and shortage always refer to price phenomena. 1,000 umbrellas could constitute a surplus if the price of an umbrella is $100, or it could constitute a shortage if the price of an umbrella is $1. Where would we expect to see prices in our supply and demand model? The answer depends on many things. It depends on whether there is one producer or many, on whether there is one buyer or many, on what the laws are, and on how quickly the market can react to a sudden rainstorm.
Fluctuation in interest rates can have an impact on consumer purchasing. When interest rates are high, consumer may be less inclined to borrow money to buy a new home or car. People who have adjustable rate home mortgages can face financial hardship or even lose their homes when interest rates spike. Retirees who live largely off investment income may need to lower their standard of living when interest rates decline. High inflation is typically accompanied by higher prices, so consumer may be less willing to buy non-essential or luxury items. If wages do not rise at the same rate of inflation, people actually lose money. When inflation rises, the value of the dollar decreases, so consumer buying power drops accordingly. The rate of unemployment can have a major effect on the economy. The more people who are out of work, the less money that is circulated into the economy through the purchase of goods and services. Even the threat of unemployment has an impact, as workers who fear losing their jobs are less inclined to spend or invest their money. A nation's foreign exchange rate is the value of its currency in the international market. When the value of the dollar is high in relation to other countries' currency, the more goods and services we are able to import. In contrast, a higher value of the dollar means that other nations may be less inclined to import products. Factors such as a rising trade surplus can increase the demands for a country's currency by foreigners, thus strengthening the currency. Now we move on to our next topic, that is economic component and its impact on business. Economic studies the methods by which society allocates its resources limited by nature to achieve societal outcomes. It does this by using a variety of theoretical approaches and studying the action of the various components that comprise an economy. Culture is also part of the internal environment of business. As we have said, although business cannot be isolated from the wider culture, it does to some extent constitute a discrete sphere of activity with distinctive roles, attitudes, and behaviors. It follows from this that the culture of a business organization can be an important factor influencing its success or failure, and that happening this culture is a key managerial task. Organization culture may even be seen as a managerial tool, though arguably not a precision instrument. The workplace may be seen as an arena in which competition between rival value systems is played out. The political environment of a country is influenced by the political organizations, such as philosophy of political parties, ideology of government or party in power, nature and extent of bureaucracy, influence of primary groups, etc., political stability in the country, foreign policy, defense and military policy, image of the country and its leaders in and outside the country. The political environment of the country influences the business to a great extent. The social dimension or environment of a nation determines the value system of the society, which in turn affects the functioning of the business. Sociological factors such as cost structure, customs and conventions, cultural heritage, view toward wealth and income and scientific methods, respect for seniority, mobility of labor, etc., have far-reaching impact on the business. These factors determine the work culture and mobility of labor, work group, etc. For instance, the nature of goods and services to be produced depends upon the demand of the people, which in turn is affected by their attitudes. Customs, so as culture values, fashion, etc. The societal groups such as trade unions or consumer forum will intervene if the business follows the unethical practices. The sovereign state has many features that recommend it as the best agent to serve as environmental regulator. States have a moral claim to legal and physical authority within their borders. They are capable of creating and enforcing binding laws and of holding both individuals and companies responsible for their actions in a non-arbitrary way. States are continuous, accessible institutions that can be contacted by other states and international organizations and taken to task for their mistakes. Perhaps most importantly, the concept that each state is sovereign is necessary for the drafting of international agreements between equals and the acceptation that those agreements will be carried out. A clear contracting party exists when other, example, Canada ratifies an international environment protocol, far from precluding the possibility of international cooperation. In most cases, national sovereignty is an essential prerequisite for it. The business in a country is greatly influenced by the technological development. The technology adopted by the industries determines the type and quality of goods and services to be produced and the type and quality of plant and equipment to be used. Technological environment influences the business in terms of investment in technology, consistent application of technology, and the effects of technology on markets. In India, advancement in automation and information technology have posed the challenging situation for the organization in future. Let's discuss about the legal environment. The international legal framework is somewhat confused. Most controls or regulation revolved around export and import controls, transfer pricing, taxes, regulation of corrupt practices, embargoed nations, antitrust, expropriations, and distribution of equity, patents, and trademark. To many, the supreme body is the International Court of Justice, situated in The Hague, Holland. Here, a number of international disputes may be taken for ultimate adjudication. However, a series of other bodies and legislation exist. The implication of international law on marketing operation are legion. The principal ones are as follows: product decision, physical, chemical, safety, performance, packaging, labeling, warranty. Pricing decision, price controls, resale, price maintenance, price fees, value added system, and taxation. Distribution contracts for agents and distribution, physical distribution, insurance, promotion, advertising codes of practice, product restriction, sales promotion and marketing research collection, storage and transmission of data. Other areas affected are obviously in currency and payments. The legal system of most of the non-socialist countries can be grouped into common law and court law. Common law is generally based on precedents or past practices, while a court, which is a comprehensive set of volumes having statutory force and covering virtually the whole spectrum of the country's law, is established by arbitrary method. Example, a speed limit of 80 kph or a 3-day period for cancelling a contract. Contracts. Central to all commercial activities is a contract. The purpose of a contract is to specify the respective rights and obligation of the parties to an agreement and outline specific procedures or actions that must take place. In this way, the possibility of disputes arising between the parties is reduced. In the context of international business, with its inherent risks and complexities, contracts assume a vital role. The principal legal arrangement underlying an export transaction is the export-sales contract. However, when a company obtains materials from a local supplier, engages the services of a freight forwarder or insurer, or concludes agreements with carriers, example shipping lines, airlines and domestic road hauliers, it is also entering contracts. International law. Buyers and sellers are at times also subject to international law, which may be defined as that body of rules which regulates relationship between countries or other international legal person. The principal sources of international law are treaties and convention. These are created when several countries reach agreement on a certain matter and bind themselves to it by authorizing their representative to sign a document embodying that agreement. Essentially, they have entered into a contract that obliges them to do something or to refrain from doing something. Failure to comply is the equivalent of breach of contract. Let's now move on to our next topic, that is external factors influencing business environment. A business does not operate in a vacuum. It has to act and react to what happens outside the factory and office walls. These factors that happen outside the business are known as external factors or influences. These will affect the main internal function of the business and possibly the objectives of the business and its strategies. The microenvironment is also known as the task environment and operating environment because the microenvironmental forces have a direct bearing on the operation of the firm. The microenvironment consists of the actors in the company's immediate environment that affects the performance of the company. These include the suppliers, marketing, intermediaries, competitors, customers, and the public. The microenvironmental factors are more intimately linked with the company than the macro factors. An important force in the microenvironment of a company is the suppliers, that is, those who supply the inputs like raw materials and components to the company. The importance of reliable source or sources of supply to the smooth functioning of the business obvious. The major task of a business is to create and sustain customer. A business exists only because of its customer. The choice of customer segments should be made by considering a number of factors, including the relative profitability, dependability, and stability of demand, growth, prospect, and the extent of competition. Competition not only includes the other firms that produce same product, but also those firms which compete for the income of the consumer. The competition here among these products may be said as desire competition, as the primary task here is to fulfill the desire of the customer. The marketing intermediaries include middlemen such as agents and merchants that helps the competition find customers or close sale with them. The marketing intermediaries are vital links between the company and the final consumer. The financiers are also important factors of internal environment. Along with financing capabilities of the company, their policies and strategies, attitudes towards risk, ability to provide non-financial assistance, etc. are very important. Public can be said as any group that has an actual or potential interest in order or an organization ability to achieve its interest. Public include media and citizen. Growth of consumer public is an important development affecting business. Let's now discuss about international business environment. International business environment is about the economics and politics of the nation in a global economy. We will study the political and economic forces that shape production, trade flows, capital flows, interest rates, exchange rates, and other variables that create the global economic landscape. The course is also about firm level decision in the face of these global forces.
The global business environment is concerned mainly with the international conditions or international forces, if you will, and how those international forces pose a threat or pose any type of impact on business. And this includes a number of different things, definitely not limited to, but I'll give you a few different examples of things to potentially look for. Includes things such as political unrest. And so over the last couple years, in 2011, we certainly experienced a great deal of that, particularly in the Middle East. And so we saw how that impacted us back here in the United States through very rising oil prices and different things of that nature. So as you can see, things that take place on the other side of the world, if you're in the United States that is, certainly has an impact on us here at home and vice versa, of course. And so the mentality is that we can't necessarily shut ourselves off, wall ourselves up to the entire world and think that we can exist simply by ourselves in isolation. What happens in one area certainly poses some type of impact or some type of effect to what happens in all other parts of the world, political unrest being one of those things. Another thing to look for are natural disasters. And we were exposed to a very significant natural disaster that took place in 2011 with the earthquake and subsequent tsunami over in Japan. And that, obviously, there was a extraordinary loss of life, which was just awful. Outside of that, though, from the business side, there was a very, very significant impact on supply networks here in the U.S. And one of the biggest things was that the U.S. was in the process of kind of making their way out of the recession that had began in 2008. And we were starting to recover at a very good rate. GDP was rising every month. And we were at a point to which we were improving. And that disaster devastated supply networks. And so now you had businesses that didn't have the ability to get the parts to produce the products in order to sell them. And that really caused us to delay our improvement. Obviously, we would have improved at a much more rapid pace had that not taken place. But once again, it's just kind of sheds light on how reliant we are on other places of the world in order to produce some of the very things that we use on an everyday basis. Another thing besides political unrest and natural disasters are international economic conditions. And this is one that we've seen play out significantly over the past several years and has really come to a head with regards to the European debt crisis, which is still ongoing. There's a lot of issues with regards to countries like Spain and Greece, to name a few, and just the amount of debt that those countries have and requiring Eurozone funds as a way of continuing to operate and meet obligations for creditors and those sorts of things. So, and those economic conditions have had some significant impacts here in the U.S. Mainly, you look at the stock market just very simply, and you can see that on a given day, the stock market will fluctuate depending upon what news is coming out of Europe with regards to, well, is Greece meeting its obligations? Is it holding up its end of the bargain in order to get another round of funding in order to use that to pay off its debt and those different types of things? And so the market reacts to the news that happens. And so if you're an investor, you're obviously very aware of what takes place in Europe because that has an impact ultimately on stock prices here. And there are a host of other impacts as well. But businesses do pay a great deal of attention to what happens globally because simply if a business is not operating on a global scale, you still are subject to the actions and the events that take place worldwide. Certainly all businesses are in some way affected by oil prices, which obviously have a drastic impact and can drastically increase costs here. So once again, the purpose of having a knowledge of what's going on in the global business environment isn't necessarily to affect it in any way, shape, or form, but the goal is that if we can identify some of the things that are taking place, once again, we can take action and take steps to try and improve our position because we at least have some knowledge that those are going to potentially come to fruition.
The 28th century has been distinguished by a number of outstanding innovation in communication technology. Since the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, the pace of change has accelerated as new technologies have been developed. Whereas previously the fastest method of reliable communication was the galloping horse, information traveling at the speed of light can now circulate the earth several times in less than 1 second. The globalization of business and commerce has become an increasingly significant reality worldwide. In 2010, the global trade in goods and services reached 25% of world GDP, while in terms of manufactured goods, international trade has multiplied by more than 100 times since 1955. The rise of globalization poses a number of important challenges to a business seeking international presence. Numerous strategic aspects must be taken into account prior to commitment at an international level and afterwards. Constant flexibility is required to adapt to changing patterns at local, regional, and international levels. Now, in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. Business environment is the environment within which the business has to operate. Is very important for running a business unit successfully at any place. Business environment as such is the total of all external forces which affect the organization and operation of business. A nation economy can be highly volatile and is often a function of a variety of factors. Economics studies the methods by which society allocates its resources, limited by nature, to achieve societal outcomes. The legal system of most of the non-socialist countries can be grouped into common law and court law. The business does not operate in a vacuum. It has to act and react to what happens outside the factory and office walls.